I can't believe we made it. We hit the Chang Switch. We crossed over into the Conway era. Voltaire is upon us. All of that is a long way of saying that self governance in Cardano starts now. That also means we've got a lot of work to do. If you are absolutely 100% positive you have never even seen a Chang Switch, let alone hit one, or if you're finding value in these videos, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies stake pool and the DRep address below in the description box, ticker AOS. We are about to discuss all of the things happening during the Chang bootstrap phase, the registration of the DReps, how to delegate to DReps, all of those things, plus what happens next at Chang +1. But first, we've got some business to take care of. The Chang hard fork happened on September 1st. It brought us into the Conway era of the Cardano ledger, and it was really the beginning, the real beginning of Voltaire, which is self-governance in Cardano. The Chang hard fork is named for Phil Chang, described here as the visionary behind Voltaire at IOHK. Sir, we thank you for your contributions to Cardano. We're going to try to live up to your vision. May you truly rest in peace. On a less solemn note, this news just barely came in before I turned this microphone on. It looks like John Deaton is going to win his primary in Massachusetts. The AP has already called it for him. This is the Times I'm showing you because they've got the actual percentages. It looks like he's got 64.7% of the vote. And if you've been paying attention at all to this, you already know he's running against the dragon. Elizabeth Warren has already gotten the news that John Deaton will be her opponent in the election, and I have acquired some CCTV footage of her working out right now. This is her training session preparing for John Deaton. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking to yourself, that is not Elizabeth Warren. That is some man boy who's obsessed with his katana from watching too much anime. I will tell you right now, that is not a man boy. That is Elizabeth Warren. She just has very short hair. Don't you dare call her a man boy. Okay, down to the real business. What you really want to know right now is what's going on with this whole Chang bootstrap phase. What's going on with these DReps? Am I supposed to be delegating to these DReps? What are these DRep IDs I keep seeing? What are my choices here? What are my options? What happens next? All these things. So on Sunday, the Chang hard fork happened, as we've already mentioned. We entered the Conway era of the ledger and Voltaire, and all of a sudden you're seeing all these posts like this one. This one's from me about people declaring themselves DReps and giving you this wild, unreadable number, and you're supposed to do something with it. So once Chang happened, once we executed on the Chang hard fork, DReps were turned on. And that's really the big thing that's happening right now in Cardano governance, at least the big sort of on-chain thing. We'll also talk about what's happening with the Constitution and the upcoming Constitutional Convention and all of those things. But the big thing you're seeing right now on Twitter is the turning on of the DReps. So as with all good things in crypto, really, it's permissionless. So anyone can become a DRep. There is a deposit of 500 ADA you have to make. But if you want to, and you've got 500 ADA, you can become a DRep. And that process is pretty simple, courtesy of our friends at the Eternal Wallet. I say our friends because I think they're friends of our entire ecosystem. I don't have any relationship with them or anything like that. But I do use the Eternal Wallet, and I think a lot of people do. There are some questions about what wallets can do what right now, and we're going to get to that because it's a little bit nuanced. But first, I'll just say there are a whole bunch of people who have decided to become DReps. And what's happening is that if you wish, you can delegate to a DRep, in which case they will vote using the power of your ADA, or you can become a DRep yourself, or you can become a direct voter, meaning that you become a DRep yourself and you aren't necessarily maybe seeking delegations from other people. You just want to vote your own ADA. That's called a direct voter. You can also delegate your ADA to the abstain vote, which means you're not really going to vote, but you've registered sort of as an abstaining voter. You can also register under the no confidence vote, in which case, anytime there is a vote of confidence in the Constitutional Committee, you just vote no confidence. So that's a pretty aggressive stance to take. If you really hate the people on the Constitutional Committee, the interim Constitutional Committee right now, you might choose that no confidence vote. So there will be people who would do that. I imagine it's not going to be very many people. I think most people will either delegate, become direct voters, or become DReps. And a lot of people will probably choose abstain. So you're probably asking yourself, why would people be, I mean, we know what voter turnouts are in modern Western democracies. They're not high. Not a lot of people love to vote. A lot of people just don't vote because it's a hassle for some people. So, why would people be incentivized to choose, even register under one of these different categories right now? So, the reason they would do that is because this was the Chang hard fork, but there's something else coming later. It's been colloquially labeled Chang plus one, and a bunch of different things are happening. But one of the things that's going to happen, and that's probably going to be in like, T minus 90 ish days. So people are saying maybe December. But one of the things that's going to happen is that in order to withdraw your staking rewards, if you're staking, and I think most of you probably are, but in order to withdraw your staking rewards at a certain point down the road, you will need to be registered in one of these categories. You'll either need to be a DRep, be a direct voter, register under the abstain category, or register under the no confidence category. You just need that to withdraw your rewards. It doesn't like stop your rewards. Your rewards will still accumulate if you do nothing. But in order to withdraw your rewards, like you currently are able to do, you'll need to be registered under one of these categories. And a lot of discussion has already happened around that incentive to get people to register. And I'll let you reference those whole discussions since I think we've got more important stuff to talk about today. But a lot of people have discussed whether or not it's a good idea to have that incentive. The fact is that incentive currently is planned to be in there. So if you want to continue withdrawing your rewards like normal, at a certain point down the road, you'll need to have registered under one of these categories. So how do you do it? You probably have already guessed. If you want to delegate to one of the DReps, it's going to have something to do with this number right here. So, where have people actually been doing all this governance stuff, registering as DReps and delegating DReps? Well, it hasn't been at Cardano GovTools, gov.tools. If you go to that address right now, you're going to see a pop up prompting you for your login and password. So, that means it's still being updated, not quite ready. Nobody's been using Cardano GovTools. Instead, we have what's shown here at Intersect Knowledge Base, the Chang Hard Fork readiness page. They've been using wallets. And you can see here from this list, all of the normal Cardano light wallets, I think, are on this list. And you can see there are various states of readiness for the hard fork. Some wallets are completely ready. Some of them are ready, but they don't have the governance features. So you've got wallets like Eternal and Yoroi and Lace, apparently, where you can do all the governance stuff. I know of people using Eternal and Yoroi for sure. I'm assuming that if this is accurate, the same is true of Lace. There are some other wallets like Nami. While they may have an important place in the history of Cardano, they do not have the governance features. You can still do all the normal stuff after the Chang hard fork, like send transactions. You just can't do all the delegating and registering as a DRep, all that kind of stuff. You can with these other wallets like Eternal and Yoroi. So it gets a little more complicated when we go down here to the hardware wallets and the full node wallets. I know a lot of people sent me messages today saying they were trying to delegate using Daedalus. I don't know what the story is there. I don't know if Daedalus is going to allow you to delegate directly through Daedalus at any point in the future. I don't know exactly what's going on there. I do know what's going on with the hardware wallets. So a lot of people in Cardano obviously have hardware wallets like the Ledger wallets, and they use those in conjunction with these light wallets like Eternal. So last week, I myself took a bunch of my ledgers, including some very, very old Ledger Nano S's. In fact, I think they're from the very first retail availability of the Nano S from Ledger. I took a bunch of those that I've had for a long time, along with a brand new Ledger Nano S Plus, and I got them all ready for this Chang hard fork. So what does that mean exactly? So if you have a Ledger wallet and it's one of these, the Nano S Plus, emphasis on the plus part, the Nano X, or the Stacks, it was a little bit easier because several weeks ago, Ledger pushed out a new version of the Ledger software, the Ledger firmware, the little operating system that your actual Ledger device uses. They pushed out a new update to that. It was like 7.x.x, I forget, it was like 7.0.0 or what it was, but it started with a 7. And several weeks ago, you could have updated the firmware for any of these newer Ledger wallets, and then you were already good to go for the Chang hard fork. For the Ledger Nano S, it was a little more questionable. We didn't get the update for the Ledger Nano S until the very last second. It was like right before the hard fork, they pushed that out, which was great. I think everybody who has a bunch of old Ledger Nano S's like me was super happy to see that update so that we could use our Ledger Nano S's to do the governed stuff. And it wasn't even clear the way the update came out. It wasn't even clear if it was just so that the Ledger Nano S would work after the Chang hard fork, like to send transactions, or if it would be that plus the governance stuff. It turns out you can do the governance stuff as well. I know because I used two different regular Ledger Nano S's, not the plus version, the old version. I used two old Ledger Nano S's to delegate just today. Just today I did that. The Ledger Nano S Plus, the Nano X, and the Stacks also work. If you go to your Eternal wallet and you try to delegate through your Eternal wallet using your Ledger device and you get an error, it's probably because you haven't updated the software on the device in a while. If you haven't done it in the last couple of weeks, you probably are definitely getting that error message. So what you need to do is plug your Ledger device into your computer or your phone and go to Ledger Live, and Ledger Live will walk you through the update. You might have to do it a couple times. I noticed with some of my very old Ledger devices, I had to update. I had to like sort of update from this really old version I was using to a newer version, and then from that version to the latest version. But once I did that, they all seem to work. So if you've got a Ledger device and it's not working with your Eternal wallet or your Roy wallet or Lace, apparently, go to Ledger Live and try to update the firmware, and then it should work. So, what is this actually going to look like inside Eternal? So, you're going to come over here to the voting tab, open up whatever wallet you want to delegate, and go to the voting tab right here. Click on voting. Then you're going to click on blockchain governance. That's this button right here. This is the one for Catalyst. We're going to click on blockchain governance. Then you're going to come down here. Here's where you've got your choices. There's this big delegate button. So over here, we've got a drop down. The drop down says own account, specify DRep ID, abstain, or no confidence. Those are those options we talked about earlier. If you want to become a DRep, you can hit the own account button and then hit delegate. And you'll have to go through a few steps and you'll have to deposit 500 ADA, which apparently is returned to you if you retire as a DRep later on. That's the steps. Those are the steps to become a DRep. If you want to delegate to a DRep, you do not have to deposit 500 ADA. I think you have to deposit like 2 ADA or something like that. And you hit that specify DRep button, and then you just enter that DRep ID down here. That's my DRep ID right there. You should choose the person who you trust to vote your ADA. You should choose the DRep who you really believe in. And I think there are going to end up being hundreds of different good DReps that a reasonable person could choose. I hope it's more like thousands. I hope we end up with the same number of DReps as we have stake pools. I would be happier with more, actually. If we end up with like 5,000 DReps, I think that'd be a wonderful thing. But you should choose the person you believe in. Or if you're willing to be a DRep yourself, just choose that own account button and become a DRep. If you don't want to deal with any of that, you just want to abstain, just hit abstain, and then you're good to go. You don't have to worry about not being able to withdraw your staking rewards down the road. Or if you hate someone on the interim constitutional committee and you want to dissolve the interim constitutional committee at every chance you can, you could also choose no confidence. But that's basically how the delegation works. If you do this with a hardware wallet, it'll be just like signing a normal transaction through Eternal with your hardware wallet. you can just sign it like normal, enter your password in the ledger, click the buttons, do that whole song and dance. If you get an error message, probably your firmware is out of date and you need to go to Ledger Live and update the firmware. Again, you might have to do that multiple times. If you would like to delegate to Army of Spies, this DRep ID will be down below in the description box to this video. It'll also be on my Twitter profile right on the main page. So now we're going to talk about what happens at Chang plus one. Remember, that's that other hard fork, that sort of follow-on hard fork that happens in T minus 90-ish days now, a little bit less than that. Like, what is it, like 80, T minus 87-ish days. So probably people are predicting it'll happen in December, something like that. So there are going to be a lot of things going on. And SIP 1694, I've done whole videos on SIP 1694. You can go back and review those videos if you want a whole video that just walks you through SIP 1694. But that is the Cardano improvement proposal that lays out the framework of our Voltaire self-governance system. And it's a little bit confusing. So if you're confused, a really helpful resource is to go to essentialcardano.io. They have an infographics section, and it has a whole bunch of infographics, including this one called A Short Introduction to SIP 1694. So just to remind you really quickly, we're going to have DReps, we're going to have stake pool operators, we're going to have a constitutional committee, and we're going to have delegating ADA holders. So as this infographic wisely points out, you can either become a DRep, you can become a constitutional committee member. It's kind of too late to become an interim constitutional committee member, but in like a year, you could become a normal constitutional committee member when the interim constitutional committee term is up. You could become an SPO, you could delegate, or you could do nothing. I love the infographic. It just has a dude like laying back here with his hands behind his head. A person could be any gender. So either gender, any gender, depending on which part of the political spectrum you're on. So here's one of the most helpful parts of this. If you're confused about the abstain and the no confidence DRep postures you could take, here's a good explanation. Abstain. This is a predefined DRep that allows ADA holders to delegate in a way that does not participate in governance and is not part of the active voting stake. So you don't participate, but you're good to go. You're sort of registered to vote, but you're just abstaining from everything. No confidence. This is a predefined DRep that allows ADA holders to delegate in a way that is considered part of the active voting stake and votes yes on every no confidence action while voting no on every other action. So for those of you who are truly recalcitrant, this is probably where you'll end up. I'll be really curious to see who is like the perma no confidence DRep delegator, because I know some of you will be in that category. Maybe not some of you listening to this, to watching this video, but some of you out there in Cardano land will be in the perma no confidence camp because you are so recalcitrant, and that's okay. This is all permissionless, and you have the right to do what you wish. So when Chang plus one actually happens, what happens is all 7 of these possible governance actions get turned on. We'll have the constitutional guardrails as well, that part of Cardano governance that the Constitutional Committee is in charge of enforcing the constitutional guardrails. Those will be on as well. But for everybody else, these 7 governance actions will exist. Motion of no confidence. This is to get rid of the Constitutional Committee. New Constitutional Committee or quorum percentage, updates to the Constitution, hard fork initiation, protocol parameter changes, treasury withdrawal, or this little info governance action that just creates an on-chain record and has no effect otherwise. So 6 big ones plus this info thing. These all get turned around. So what'll be interesting is sometime around the same point that Chang plus one happens. And Charles went through all of this in a big video. His most recent video he put out, he goes through all of this information. So I highly suggest you check that out. If not, we're going to kind of summarize all of it real quickly right now. So around the same time as Chang plus one, when all of this gets turned on, we'll also have the Constitutional Convention in Argentina, in Buenos Aires. What's going on right now is we have all of these constitutional workshops happening. They're happening in locations around the world because Cardano is truly international. So there might even be one in your country. But what's going to happen is all those workshops, they're going to be working on the draft constitution. And they're also going to be deciding on delegates to send to Argentina. These delegates will be from 50 countries, and there will be 50 or more of these delegates. They'll all go to Argentina. They will look at the proposed constitution at a constitutional convention, and then they will propose a constitution for the Cardano governance system, the tricameral Cardano governance system of DReps, the interim constitutional committee members, and the stake pool operators to ratify. So all three chambers of the government will be involved in this process, and they will ratify the version 1 constitution. And this is an important point. This is our minimum viable governance constitution. It's going to change. This governance thing, I've said it many, many times, but this is going to get really spicy. Enemies will be made. There will be people who will hate every single DRep. There will be a DRep for everyone to hate because there will be divisive issues that come up. People will be on different sides. I hope when this happens, people realize that reasonable people can have different opinions. Reasonable and intelligent people can have different opinions on some of these divisive issues. And while I think it's good for us to have spirited debate, spirited discussion, and to vigorously debate all these issues, it doesn't mean we have to hate each other. We will. There will be people who will hate for every single DRep. There will be multiple people who hate them because of some vote, because of some stance they took on some issue. That will be true for every single DRep. And maybe even you, when you reveal that you delegated that DRep, people will hate you because they're on the opposite side of some issue. It doesn't need to be that way, but we're talking about human beings here, and they will be that way. So 1 year after the Chang hard fork, so it's 73 epochs, which is equal to 365 days or 1 year. So September 1st, 2025, the term of the interim constitutional committee will also end. And it's important to note here, Charles said in that recent video that at that point, IOG will be out. IOG will have no role in the government. They will not be a part of the constitutional committee going forward. They will not be DReps. IOG will be out. They'll just be normal citizens of the nation state of Cardano like everybody else. They'll just be normal citizens. That's going to happen a year from the Chang hard fork we just had a couple days ago. So we've got a couple things coming up. It's going to be Chang +1, which is going to be like December-ish. And then next September 2025, the interim constitutional committee will end and we'll have to vote in a new constitutional committee. And that's the point where IOG is already saying they're going to be out. So those are going to be the big things that are coming up in this next year after the Chang hard fork. Chang +1 and the interim constitutional committee ending. Then you've got the budget. This is one of the pieces that is probably the most important. If you're not familiar with governance, the power of the purse inevitably becomes the most important thing that's going on. So this is where Intersect comes in. I think when we first started hearing about Intersect, when Charles was talking about a members-based organization, a lot of people were confused. What is this thing? What are we talking about? We already have the 3 founding entities, Cardano Foundation, Emergo, and IOG. And then Charles is saying, hey, we're also going to have this members-based organization, this MBO. It's going to be called Intersect. And IOG is going to be a part of it, and everybody else is going to be a part of it. And then, even companies can be a part of it, and you as individual members can be a part of it. You can either be you can be a free member if you're an individual, or you can pay, the ADA equivalent of $10 to become a paid member. You can do that right now. You can go to the Intersect MBO page and do that right now. But what is this Intersect MBO thing? What is this even? So in governance, you've got this problem. You can't just put together a legislative body because that's what the DReps basically are. The DReps plus the SPOs plus kind of the interim constitutional committee, they're kind of all the DReps are doing kind of purely a legislative thing, and the SPOs and the ICC also doing legislative things. But you can't just have a legislature. You've got to have like a legislative staff to help figure out what bills they're going to try to pass, what governance actions should be considered. And then you really need a bureaucracy, right? It's like the 50 members of the Senate don't just, write the bills themselves. Those like 90-year-old senators, they're not like sitting down at their laptops at night writing those 700-page bills. They have a legislative staff to do that. And then that legislative staff is actually working with the bureaucracy. Like if it has to do with energy, they're talking to the Department of Energy. If it has to do with the Department of Defense, they're talking to the Department of Defense. And a lot of that governance stuff, that legislative work that gets done, a lot of the producing of those bills is happening in that bureaucracy. And there you have a lot of experts. In fact, there's a joke that the congressman and the president and vice president, these are all temporary employees of the government, whereas the bureaucracy, those are the permanent employees. Those are the people who've been around for a long time and really know what they're doing. This is the joke. I'm not trying to romanticize bureaucracy because we all hate bureaucracy. We hate it. But in order to do all the governance stuff, we're going to need some of those bureaucratic functions to be carried out. And Intersect is going to help us with that. So Intersect has these committees. Intersect has a bunch of committees that are focused on different things. And the idea is that there will be experts on those committees who are actually skilled in the things that the committee deals with, just like in a real world bureaucracy. I know they probably would hate to be called a bureaucracy, but let's face it, they're doing some of the same things that bureaucracy does in a normal real world government. So, in terms of the budget may be the best way to think about this right now. So, if we just said, hey, DReps, come up with a budget, it would be the most impossible, chaotic process ever because everybody be like, I think we should give, 50,000 ADA to this person, or let's give, like we already saw the huge controversy, let's give 200 million ADA to these guys who want to be VCs. Or, the even more ridiculous one, let's burn all of the money in the treasury. So, of course, you already know I hate both of these ideas. As I've said many, many times, I would never, ever vote for these. At least I don't think there's any circumstance. Maybe if, North Korea is threatening to nuke the entire world. Maybe that's the circumstance in which we're forced to do something crazy like that. But in normal circumstances, never going to do any of these things. That's why the budget is so important. So we're not going to have that process where, hundreds, maybe thousands of DReps are all like, hey, give 100,000 ADA to this, give 1 million ADA to this cause. Instead, what we're going to have is we're going to have the budget committee at Intersect come up with a holistic budget, a whole budget that pays for all of the things that need to be paid for in the Cardano ecosystem. You'll notice this is how real governments work. Real governments pass budgets every year. It's like the most contentious thing that happens in governance, aside from elections. It's the most contentious thing. It's the allocating of resources. I've said in previous videos, governance is really the allocation of resources, and that's what a holistic budget does. It's the only way to really get it done, because if everybody just proposes, their own pet project they want to get funded, we'll never actually pass anything. You have to do it as a holistic budget, and you have to have these experts in something that, I hate to use the word again, I hate to use it, but something that looks like a bureaucracy, have to create this budget. And then the legislative body is going to look at that budget and they're going to make adjustments, decide, nobody's down with this part over here. Let's get rid of that. Everybody really wants this other thing. We need to add this in. Then we're all going to come up with, probably many, 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 many drafts of the budget before we get to the final one. There's going to be a lot of negotiating and all the horrible stuff that we all hate with governance. All that's going to go on, and people are going to be fighting and probably making backroom deals and all the, weird corruption stuff. We're going to have to figure out how to combat all of that. That's definitely going to be a problem, like it is with any government, but that's what's going to happen. But the great thing is the starting point is going to be Intersect creating our first budget. They're going to come up with a possible budget, a draft budget that the DReps can either pass or not pass. And then in the future, if people don't want some Intersect budget committee to make the next budget, we don't have to. We can do something totally different. It's really up to all of us in Cardano. But I think this is a great starting point to have this budget committee in Intersect that can, create a draft budget that we can all look at and decide, like, hey, should we devote some money to marketing? Should we devote some money to core development? Should we devote some money to name whatever your favorite pet project is? Then the government, the legislative body, can actually come in and say, yes, we approve of this. No, we don't. And eventually, hopefully, we'll actually pass a budget that makes sense to everybody. And I think any individual member, you as an individual member of Cardano, me, anybody else, there are parts of the budget we're going to hate. There are other parts of the budget we're going to wish were included that aren't. Nobody's going to get everything they want. It's going to be this process of compromise, but that's what's going to happen for Cardano's first budget. I've already made clear my feelings that we should be very careful about spending any money beyond whatever the Treasury earns every year. I can almost guarantee whatever budget comes out of this process is probably going to exceed that amount. I think it's pretty predictable that uh, a lot of people are going to want a lot of things that probably exceed that amount, whatever amount is coming in to the Treasury every year. So it's this process. There are going to be people who are going to want to spend a lot more. Guaranteed, there are going to be people who will want to spend, uh, half the budget, in 1 year, which doesn't make sense to any reasonable person, at least according to my perspective, but will definitely make sense to them. So it's going to be this process of people who want to be a little more conservative about the spending and people who want to be a little more liberal about the spending. You can see where this is headed already. This sounds like normal politics because that's what governance really is. Like I said, this is all going to get really spicy. People are going to hate each other. Mortal enemies. Mortal enemies will find each other. There will be passionate hatred and fighting and all those things. I hope that's outweighed by reasonableness, but we're all going to have front row seats to watch this thing go down. I hope you're having a great week, and I'll talk to you soon.